The models of memory. This includes the working memory model, the multi-store model, reconstructive memory, and episodic and semantic memory. The multi-store model by Atkin and Sheriff, 1968. A fun way to remember that this is a model containing the sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory is by remembering that it's a multi-store model. It contains multiple models of memory, like the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. So, for further notice, I will be referring to the short-term memory as STM and the long-term memory as LTM. In your exam, you can do this as well, however, you have to write the full thing first and then abbreviate. Before moving on, you need to know encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding is how memories are encoded, which means how they are registered as memories. Register information as a memory. This can be in different forms: visual, acoustic, and tactile, and semantic. Storage is how memories are stored, which means how they remain as memories after they've been registered. Keeping memories after encoding can be in sensory memory, short-term memory, and it links to neuroscience as there is actual brain storage. Retrieval is how we retrieve memories when the output is needed, which means finding and accessing stored memories. We cannot access memories without retrieval. Retrieval can be reconstructive. If there's a lack of retrieval, then we forget information. There are still more key definitions that you need to know so that you can understand the models of memory. Capacity is how much information can be held in a memory store, whereas duration is how much time the information can be held in the memory store. They differ. Displacement is when the short-term memory is full and new information pushes the old information out. Chunking is grouping information together. For example, I may group my two best friends together in the same memory. Modality free means the memory is not linked to a specific type of sensory information, so it's not linked to any of your senses. Finally, rehearsal. Rehearsing information via a rehearsal loop can help retain the information in the short-term memory and consolidate it to the long-term memory, where it is predominantly encoded semantically. The information can be encoded and retrieved for up to any duration and is equally, seemingly, unlimitedly capacitated. This shows a diagram of the multi-store model. This was created by Shefkin and Arif, and it shows how it works. Also, please excuse me botching Shefkin and Arif's name. I do not know how to say it. However, the key things about these diagrams is you can see how the memory stores interact, and you can see how all them different definitions help us to remember memories. You can see how they all work for this memory model. It's a very useful diagram. This is a strength of the memory model, as it's easy to see, easy to visualize, and easy to explain. It's very useful when explaining memories. So, what is the sensory memory? Information comes through the sensory memory by our five senses. The capacity of the sensory register is extremely large. Encoding depends on which sense is being used. The duration is extremely brief, less than half a second. If attention is paid, information is moved to the short-term memory, and information is received from our senses. Just a reminder, STM stands for short-term memory. The short-term memory is a temporary store, otherwise known as the working memory store, and is better described as such. The capacity of the short-term memory is limited, 7 plus / -2. It stores 5 to 7 items. The encoding of the short-term memory is acoustic. This could be out loud or internal. If you don't know what acoustic means, it means verbal. So do you know when you speak in your head or when you speak out loud? That is how you encode memory to the short-term memory. Duration is 18 to 30 seconds. Information is rehearsed and then it goes to the long-term memory. And chunking leads to the short-term memory having a bigger capacity. Just to remind you, LTM does stand for long-term memory. This is a permanent store. However, that does not mean that there isn't retrieval issues. The capacity and the duration is unlimited. Encoding is based upon meaning. It is semantic. Information is retrieved or it's forgotten. So Miller is a piece of supporting research you can use. So do you know how earlier on I said that the short-term memory's capacity was 7 plus or -2? He was the person who found that. So Miller used number sequencing by showing participants numbers for a few seconds before removing the numbers and then instructing participants to write down what they could remember. Miller found the magic number 7 as discussed. This is proof for short-term memory's capacity. However, an issue with using this research as research support for the multi-store model is that it's low in mundane realism. We don't often have to rehearse numbers like this, so therefore that could be why memory is weaker, and so therefore we don't get a holistic view of what capacity could be in everyday life. However, it can be applied to everyday tasks, such as trying to remember your cell phone number. Second piece of supporting research is Peterson and Peterson. They did the duration of short-term memory, whilst Miller did the capacity of short-term memory. Peterson and Peterson aim to measure how long the short-term memory holds information for without rehearsal. I know it says long-term memory on the slide. I'm so sorry about that. So how did Peterson and Peterson test duration? So they use trigrams. If you don't know what trigrams are, they're sets of 3 letters like BRT. Participants briefly saw the trigrams, and then afterwards they counted backwards from 3 to prevent rehearsal. After intervals of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 or 18, they had to recall the trigram. So what were the results? Just after 18 sections, the recall accuracy dropped to about 10%. In conclusion, short-term memory had a limited duration of around 18 to 30 seconds without rehearsal. This supports the multi-store model's idea of the short-term memory as a temporary storage. The multi-store model supports the nature argument, as it states that we have an inborn network of cognitive and biological systems that enable this process of attention rehearsal and recalling information to happen. However, we must recognize the interaction between the environment to put information into our memory system. Strengths. This theory is reductionist. I know you may hear reductionism and think that is a bad thing. However, it's a strength because it allows us to know how memory works, to know how the processing works of memory. That diagram, it was so easy to look at and explain how memory works. That is a strength. This theory is tested using closely controlled, highly reliable lab experiments like Miller, Badley, and Peterson and Peterson. The theory links with the working memory model, showing further how reliable this theory is and how it can lead to more understanding. It can be applied to everyday tasks such as revising for exams. For example, Peterson and Peterson's experiment can be applied to revising for exams. You have research support like Peterson and Miller. Research comes from highly controlled experiments that yield cause and effect. The only cause of that experiment is the reason why they're testing, is the duration, is the capacity. It is highly, highly reliable. Weaknesses. This theory is reductionist. It takes a big compact theory such as memory and turns it into simple components such as the short-term memory, long-term memory and the sensory memory. And it says that every single memory that we have has to go through a system of rehearsal. Do you rehearse your birthday? But you still remember it. The working memory model is a much better explanation of short-term memory than the multi-store model, which oversimplifies short-term memory. The research is often low in validity due to having artificial tasks leading to a lack of mundane realism and ecological validity. And it's difficult to prove the cause of memory loss, which, according to this model, is just a lack of rehearsal.